In 2005, two NASA scientists ran a calculation that sounded like science fiction. They found that a single man-made object in central China had shifted enough mass on the surface of this planet to change the length of the day. The Three Gorges Dam. 40 billion cubic meters of water held in one place, measurably slowing the Earth's rotation. That was the biggest dam ever built. It held the record for 20 years. Right now, in a Himalayan gorge most people have never heard of, China is building its replacement, roughly 3 times the output. An estimated $167 billion. Carved into the deepest canyon on Earth, 30 kilometers from a disputed border, upstream of the water that well over 1 billion people depend on. America once built like this, it doesn't anymore. And that gap between what Washington remembers and what Beijing is pouring in concrete is the real story. Stay with me. Start with the claim in the title because it sounds impossible. When the Three Gorges Reservoir filled on the Yangtze River, it gathered roughly 40 billion tons of water into one artificial lake. According to NASA scientists Benjamin Fong Chao and Richard Gross, moving that much mass, lifting it effectively, and parking it at altitude changed the Earth's moment of inertia. Think of a figure skater. Arms in, she spins faster. Arms out, she slows. Concentrate billions of tons of water away from the oceans, and you've moved the planet's arms just slightly outward. NASA's calculation: the day got longer by 0.06 microseconds. The planet's axis shifted by about 2 centimeters. Now let's be honest about scale because this channel doesn't do panic. A single major earthquake does more. The 2004 Indian Ocean quake shortened the day by 2.68 microseconds. You will never feel a Three Gorges day. No clock you own can even display one. But hold on to the deeper point. A government built something so large that the effect shows up in planetary physics. That is a statement about capability, not about clocks. And Three Gorges itself was a statement. China's critics never expected it to make. 17 years of construction, from 1994 to 2012. A wall of concrete over 2 kilometers long. 32 main turbines totaling 22.5 gigawatts. Still today, the largest power station on Earth. More than 1.2 million people were relocated to make way for the reservoir, a social cost Beijing acknowledges and critics have never let it forget. Western engineers spent the 1990s predicting the project would drown in silt, corruption, and cost overruns. Some of that criticism aged well. Sedimentation and landslides remain genuine problems on the Yangtze. The prediction that China couldn't finish it did not. And here's the turn. Three Gorges, the dam that bends the numbers of the Earth itself, is about to become China's second biggest power project. The Yarlung Tsangpo begins near Mount Kailash and runs east across the Tibetan Plateau for over 1,000 kilometers. Then it hits a wall of rock, the 7,782-meter peak of Namcha Barwa, and does something almost no great river does. It turns, a full hairpin, carving the deepest canyon on Earth. Around that bend, the river plunges roughly 2,000 meters and about 50 kilometers. For a hydropower engineer, that number is the whole game. Dams make power from falling water. This is the greatest concentrated drop of any major river on the planet. And consider where this is happening. Madog was, until October 2013, the last county in all of China without a road connection, a place you reached on foot over a 4,000-meter pass, carrying supplies on your back. Barely more than 10,000 people live there, in one of the most isolated districts on the planet. Beijing has now designated it the site of the largest infrastructure project in human history. The highway came first, then the power lines, the survey teams, the work camps. The electricity itself is destined mostly for the megacities of eastern China, carried across the country on ultra-high voltage transmission lines, a technology China leads the world in precisely because its power and its people sit thousands of kilometers apart. In December 2024, Beijing approved a project to take it. On July 19, 2025, Premier Li Qiang stood in Ningxi, Tibet, and launched construction of the Madog Hydropower Station, also called the Motuo Project. That same day, China created an entirely new state-owned corporation, the China Yajiang Group, just to build it. The published numbers are staggering, roughly 60 gigawatts of capacity across 5 cascade stations, a projected 300 billion kilowatt hours a year, about 3 times the output of 3 gorges. Cost estimates reported at 1.2 trillion yuan, around $167 billion, which would make it likely the most expensive single infrastructure project in human history. For scale, 300 billion kilowatt hours is more electricity than the entire United Kingdom uses in a year. Target for commercial operation, according to Chinese state planning, is 2033. The announcement alone moved markets. Chinese cement, steel, and heavy construction stocks surged on the groundbreaking news, and state media reached for a phrase not used since 3 Gorges, the project of the century. Xi Jinping had personally flagged the lower Yarlung Tsangpo as a national priority years earlier, folding it into China's pledge to peak carbon before 2030. This is not a ministry's pet project. It carries the signature of the top. 8 years for the largest machine ever attempted. And the way they plan to build it is stranger than the dam itself. Here's what most coverage misses. Midog is not really a wall across a river. The core of the design, as described in Chinese engineering plans, is diversion, boring roughly 4 tunnels, each around 20 kilometers long, straight through the Namcha Barwa Massif and shortcutting the river's hairpin bend entirely. Water goes in one side of the mountain, falls 2 kilometers through the rock, and comes out the other side spinning turbines. The engineering risks are not hidden, and Chinese technical literature discusses them openly. This is one of the most seismically active zones on Earth, where the Indian plate grinds into Eurasia. The tunnels cross fault zones. At these depths, engineers face rock bursts, stone exploding off tunnel walls under pressure, and soft rock that slowly squeezes tunnels shut. In 1950, this exact region produced the Assam-Tibet earthquake, one of the most powerful ever recorded on land. Critics, including scientists cited in Indian and Western press, argue that putting the world's largest power station here is a gamble against geology itself. Beijing's engineers answer that the cascade design and tunnel routing are built for it. The region's file is genuinely frightening. In 1950, the Assam-Tibet earthquake struck just south of here at magnitude 8.6, among the strongest continental quakes ever recorded, killing thousands and rearranging entire river valleys. In 2000, a landslide at Yigong dammed a tributary of this very river. When that natural dam burst months later, the flood wave tore downstream into India and left tens of thousands homeless. And above it all hang the Himalayan glaciers, retreating, pooling into unstable lakes that can burst without warning. Chinese engineers know every line of this file. Their answer is monitoring networks, conservative heights on the cascade, and the argument that tunnels bored through rock ride out shaking better than walls built across valleys. It is, at minimum, the highest stakes bet in the history of civil engineering. Nobody on Earth has done this before at this scale. That's not hype. That's the literal situation. And the geology may not even be the most dangerous part, because that water, when it leaves the turbines, crosses a border. Follow the river past the dam site. Within about 30 kilometers, it crosses into territory India controls, and China claims, Arunachal Pradesh, where it becomes the Siang, then the Brahmaputra. Then it enters Bangladesh as the Jamuna and fans out into the largest river delta on Earth. Along that path live hundreds of millions of people. Bangladesh alone, over 160 million people downstream, with the river system supplying, by common estimates, more than half of the country's irrigation. Here is the uncomfortable legal fact. There is no water-sharing treaty. None of the countries on this river are bound by the UN Watercourses Convention. China has data-sharing arrangements with India, but no enforceable obligation on how much water flows south. Indian politicians have used a phrase for the Midog project, a water bomb. That's the language of Tapar Gao, a member of parliament from Arunachal Pradesh, the fear being not everyday flow, but what a structure this size could do in a flood release, an accident, or a crisis. Beijing's position, stated repeatedly, is that Midog is run-of-the-river, won't meaningfully store water, and won't harm downstream states. Independent hydrologists note the dry season risk is real but hard to quantify. The great majority of the Brahmaputra's volume is added below the dam by monsoon rains and Indian tributaries. Commonly cited estimates put the flow crossing from Tibet at somewhere around a third of the Brahmaputra's volume at the Indian border in the dry months, and far less by the delta once the monsoon pours in. So, the apocalypse scenario, China switching off the river, is overstated. The leverage scenario is not. Dry season baseline flow is exactly what irrigation and river transport depend on. And there is precedent for water becoming an instrument. In 2017, during the Doklam border standoff, China simply stopped sharing hydrological data with India for a season, the data India uses to forecast floods. No treaty obliged Beijing to resume. That is the realistic shape of the threat, not a wall of water. A tap of information and of timing controlled entirely from one side. India isn't waiting for clarity. It has revived plans for its own giant on the Siang, an 11-gigawatt dam whose openly stated purpose, according to Indian officials, is to act as a buffer against whatever China does upstream. Think about that. The Himalayas are becoming a place where countries build mega dams at each other. And the country that invented this kind of nation-scale water engineering? It's watching from the sidelines. In 1931, in the depths of the Great Depression, the United States started pouring the Hoover Dam. 21,000 workers, a purpose-built city in the Nevada desert. The largest concrete structure humanity had ever attempted. It was finished in 5 years, 2 years ahead of schedule. Then Grand Coulee, still the largest power station in America at about 6.8 gigawatts. The Tennessee Valley Authority electrified an entire poor region in a decade. For a generation, the American dam was the global symbol of what an industrial democracy could do. Now run the comparison forward. Medog's planned capacity is roughly 30 times Hoover's, and the United States hasn't completed a major new hydropower dam in decades. The current American era is, in fact, the era of dam removal. Over 2,000 dams have been taken down since the 1990s, including, in 2024, the largest dam removal project in history on the Klamath River. To be fair, many of those removals are defensible because of aging structures and dying salmon runs. This isn't a sneer at America, it's an observation about capability. The machine that built Hoover in 5 years now routinely spends longer than that on environmental review for a transmission line. The numbers are worth putting on screen. Major federal environmental reviews in the US have averaged around 4.5 years for the paperwork, before the lawsuits, before a shovel moves. Hoover went from authorization to full operation in roughly 6 years. And let's keep the ledger honest. The men who built Hoover hung over a 200-meter gorge without harnesses, and 96 of them died. A price no modern democracy would or should accept. Some of America's lost speed is civilization, not decay. But not all of it. China builds with modern safety engineering too, and by a much-checked statistic, it used more cement in 3 years than the United States used in the entire 20th century. Speed is a choice embedded in institutions. One country's institutions are optimized to stop bad projects. The others are optimized to finish big ones, including, sometimes, bad ones. One superpower is deleting 20th century infrastructure. The other is building the largest power plant in the history of the species. Both can be reasonable choices, but only one of them shows up on the grid. So why now? Why spend $167 billion on a canyon in Tibet? Officially, carbon targets and development of the Tibetan region. But look at what is actually eating electricity in 2026. Artificial intelligence. Data centers. In the AI race, compute is limited by chips, and chips are limited by power. The US is scrambling to restart nuclear plants and permit gas turbines to feed data centers. China's answer includes things like Medog, 300 billion kilowatt-hours a year of firm, carbon-free power, roughly the output of 30 large nuclear reactors from a single project. Analysts also note the project's other function: cement, steel, and jobs at a moment when China's property sector has cratered. A trillion yuan stimulus you can point a camera at. Zoom out to the scoreboard that actually decides the AI era: total electricity. China already generates roughly twice as much power as the United States each year, and the gap is widening. In 2025 alone, it added more solar capacity than most nations possess in total, while simultaneously building nuclear plants, coal plants, and now the largest hydropower complex ever conceived. This isn't about any single technology being virtuous. It's a government that has decided electricity itself is a strategic weapon and is arming accordingly. Maydog is simply the loudest sentence in that doctrine. So, the close. NASA told us a dam can slow the rotation of the Earth. The next one will be 3 times bigger. But the microseconds were never the point. The point is that one civilization still believes in projects that show up in planetary physics and is betting $167 billion that the future belongs to whoever generates it. The day will get longer by a number no one can feel. The century may turn on it anyway. If you want the deep story of who is actually winning the technology race, not the headlines but the machinery underneath, subscribe. That is what Shift Doctrine is for.